Very, very sad, really sad. I mean, it's actually whacked me a lot more than I thought it would when I heard yesterday. I just think he was a very rare political creature. I don't think, we're all unique, but I think Charles was very, very clever, very funny, very engaging, very personable, very empathetic. He was quite shy in his own way. I think he was much more private than people sometimes maybe understood. But he believed big things. He loved Scotland. He loved his constituency. He loved the Liberal Party, and he made a difference.
Let's talk a little bit about the public Charles Kennedy. Charles Kennedy, the politician. What did he achieve?
Well, he took the Liberal Democrats to a success that they wouldn't have minded having a few weeks ago. And I think what Charles did as a politician was that in an era when people say there aren't enough characters, there aren't enough authentic people who get to the top in politics, Charles was authentic, he was passionate, he was principled, and I think he achieved a high watermark for the modern Liberal Democrats. And he did that in part by taking such a strong and principled stand on Iraq. And even though we are very close friends, that was something where I think the other thing I really liked about Charles is that he could disagree with people, but he didn't then say, well, that means you have to attack them on their integrity and their decency and their values. You just have different opinions. So I think he brought something very, very special to politics. And I think that's why, I've been going around the place that is walking around the streets here in London, never mind what it's like in Scotland. And he was one of those politicians who cut through to the public. They all knew who he was, they liked him, even if they didn't agree with him. And I think that's what people are missing today.
He was a left-of-centre politician.
Absolutely.
He voted against the coalition between the Liberal Democrats.
He should have been Labour.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Did you ever understand why he wasn't Labour?
Well, particularly in recent years, Fiona and I and our family, we used to go to Charles's constituency every Christmas and quite a few Easters as well. And Philip Gould and I had annual attempts to persuade Charles to come to the Labour Party. And there wasn't that much politically. But I think what Charles would always say is, look, I am a Highland Liberal. That is what I am. There is a tradition in our politics of liberalism, and that's what I believe in. And he did.
Though, of course, he started out in the SDP, David Owen's breakaway from the Labour Party.
He did. And I think if Charles had come from a different part of the country, I think if Charles had been brought up in the Central Belt or the north of England, I've got no doubt at all he would have been Labour. But he felt this liberal thing very, very deeply, and it meant something to him, and I think we should respect that.
He was the youngest MP at the age of 23, and then he went on at a very young age to become the leader of the party. Did it all come to him too young because of his talents, do you think?
I don't know. I think that he... I heard Paddy Ashdown earlier saying that to become an MP at 23, you do maybe rob yourself of certain years of formation and development that he wouldn't have had. I also think that Charles, for all his bonhomie and for all the empathy and the fact that... I've been around the streets of Fort William with him, where people come up to him and he knows them and he touches them and they like him. But he found that stuff more pressurising than you sometimes might have imagined. It didn't all come as naturally as maybe it looked. And I think becoming leader, I don't think I had any doubt that he was leadership quality and was a good leader for the Liberal Democrats. So I don't think it was a question of it coming too young, but I think there was always this struggle within Charles about that expressed itself through, I think, a very difficult relationship with alcohol that we all know about.
Well, you've written about that today. Unlike you, he never beat it, did he?
Well, I don't think you ever beat it. I don't think I've necessarily ever beaten it. It's always there and it hangs around with you. But I think that what's true is that Charles could go through periods where you sort of thought he was doing the day at a time thing quite well, and he could maybe turn it into weeks and into months. But I never felt with Charles that he was totally on top of it. And we did talk about this a lot. I think this is why I did maybe develop a closer friendship with him than a lot of people in politics, because I think he saw me as one of the few people he could talk to about it. He didn't want to talk about it, and I understood why. I did actually try to persuade him to be much more open. I felt that would have helped him. I felt he'd have found actually in politics and in the media that people would have been more sympathetic than maybe he thought, given they all knew anyway. And he did get help. I mean, he went to rehab places, he dried himself out, he sorted himself out at various points, but I never felt he was totally comfortable with the idea of the day at a time becoming a week and a month and a year and then a lifetime. And you know, I talked to him a fair bit through the campaign and after the campaign. I didn't get the impression he was drinking a lot. Maybe he has been a little bit in recent days, but I felt that he was... I never felt totally comfortable that he was on top of it.
And it was what cost him his career, effectively, wasn't it?
Well, it was certainly what made the Liberal Democrats feel that he couldn't carry on as leader. And I don't think Charles was bitter about that. I think he was maybe a bit bitter at some of the ways that some of the people treated him. But I think he understood that, you know, it's difficult in modern politics to have a leader where his team is thinking, you know, is he going to turn up today? Is he going to be the Charles Kennedy that we know and like and respect, or is he going to be the guy who's slightly losing the plot? And he understood that. And I think what was wonderful in the last few years is that Charles was, even in defeat, beginning to envisage a different sort of political life. I suspect he might have gone to the Lords. I suspect that he would have... I mean, he was really happy when he was rector of Glasgow University, for example, as a different sort of public service, but he loved it. And I think he would have carried on being a public figure, but in a very different way.
And what about the family life? Because that was not a success either, and I hadn't realised that his father actually died during the recent general election.
Yeah, no, he's had all sorts... Charles has had a lot of big blows in recent times. The break-up of the marriage... I think he stayed very friendly with Sarah. I think they were actually a really loving couple, but it just didn't work out. He doted on his son, and, you know, that is really sad, a young boy. But it didn't work out with the marriage, and I think that hit him hard. I think the death of his father hit him hard. He had other issues with close friends and family that were tough, and then losing his seat coming on top of that. But I think he prepared himself for that psychologically. The first time he actually mentioned to me, I think I might lose, was last Christmas. And I was actually quite taken aback by that. I thought he was so popular in his constituency. But he was saying, he was going around the streets and people in the campaign, and people saying, Charles, I think you're great, I really love you, you've been a fantastic MP, but I'm voting SNP. And it's not about you, it's about other stuff. And he had to take that on the chin. And he did take it on the chin. I think
what did he think about the SNP?
What did he? I think he felt that... I don't think he was the biggest fan. But equally...
I mean, I say that because he was very Scottish, he was very much a Highlander.
But he wasn't a nationalist. He was very, very passionate about the Better Together campaign. He got involved in that. I think he had a respect for the way the SNP built their case and kept going. But, I mean, Charles was a unionist. He did believe in Scotland being part of the UK. I think his bigger concern in recent years was his worry, which he said right from the word go when the coalition was formed. The Conservatives are very, very ruthless in power, and they're going to use us to battering ram some of the things that we wouldn't want to do. Nick Clegg's there now, he's going to have to help him, and it'll get us wiped out.
What about the war? What did he say to you about the war, about Iraq, which has caused so much bitterness in politics?
It has caused so much bitterness in politics, but it never caused bitterness between me and him, and it never caused bitterness between him and Tony Blair. I think that was one of Charles's great strengths. He wasn't one of these people who felt, I disagree with you, really, really passionately, therefore I'm going to question your values and your integrity and your character and your decency. He didn't do that. He didn't agree with the position that Tony Blair took, strongly, passionately, but he didn't, as it were, lack respect for the difficulty of that decision. So, and I think that's what people see in him today. I mean, Fiona, my partner, was remembering those times when he used to do those programmes with Austin Mitchell and Norman Tebbit, and you can imagine three more different people across the spectrum, but you could... One of the reasons that was successful as television, there was mutual respect there. And Charles had a lot of respect for people who were in public life for what he would see as the right reasons, because they believed things and they wanted to make a difference, and that's what he did all his life.
As you know, the cliché often attributed to Enoch Powell is all political careers end in failure. Will that be your abiding memory of Charles Kennedy?
No, my abiding memories of Charles Kennedy will be very, very personal ones. Actually, most of them won't have anything to do with politics. It'll be our families in Scotland. I don't know why, but I was particularly tickled when he proudly announced to us that he'd never actually been up Ben Nevis, even though he'd lived with it there all his life. He used to find my family's kind of maniacal keep fit regimes on holiday utterly absurd. He said, I'll stay and read a book or watch the telly. So no, I think, yeah, clearly it's a life unfulfilled when it ends at 55. Clearly it's a leadership unfulfilled when he's pushed out in the way that he was. But he did some amazing things along the way, and I think that he will be remembered as one of those rare politicians, that's what we're seeing today, who did somehow manage to cut through to the public and do it in a way that whether people liked him, disliked him, disagreed, didn't like his politics, you know, they saw Charles Kennedy coming across the road and they wanted to talk to him. And that's a real strength.
Thank you.
Thank you.